Hello, Shoyan here. This room is mostly coming together. So today, I'm finishing up the front, the altar section, and the Joinery. I'm working on the altar section and the Joinery. This renovation actually started because the owner wanted to add a household altar room. So this is really the main event of the whole job, though it's not a large space. The front is divided into 3 bays, with the altar section in the middle and the Joinery on the sides. I start from the floor.
No.
I work on the floors in all 3 areas at once, the altar section and both Joinery. I'm using 30mm joistless floorboards, which don't need joists underneath if the span is 1 meter. But this time, I'm putting joists in anyway. Since I want to add insulation, I set the joists at 300mm intervals, which makes it much easier to fit. So I secure joists at that pitch, fit the insulation between them, and then lay the 30mm joistless floorboards on top. For a 1 meter span without joists, you'd normally run the floorboards with the end grain facing the threshold. But right now, I'm laying them parallel to the threshold. It looks a lot cleaner this way. The depth is shorter, so if I run the end grain along the depth, the boards are short and it's easier to install. But with the end grain against the threshold, if the boards swell or warp over time, the end grain starts to peek out from the threshold. So I run it parallel instead. That's the secret to keeping it looking clean.
Let's get the door.
Now that the floor is down, I move on to the altar section. It's in the middle and the Joinery are on both sides. I build the altar section first because I want to reach in from behind to do all the work. If I finish the Joinery first, I won't be able to do that. That's why the altar section comes first. I frame the partition, then move on to the overhead work. Anything you can't do later, you do first. That's why the ceiling comes first. I'm using M-cloth panels on the altar section. That's because this is a fully built-in altar, not a freestanding one. It gets 3 shelf tiers, and having M-cloth on the walls makes it much easier to secure support or backing because it holds the screws well. So I surround the section with M-cloth and build a solid, sturdy wall. Now I make the parts for the 3 built-in altar tiers in the space. The term is a bit confusing, but the household altar space is called butsuma, and the altar unit placed there is called butsudan in Japanese. This time, I'm building it in 3 tiers like a display stand. The bottom will become a lower cabinet as is traditional. I use 3 wide solid boards for the shelves plus 2 risers, 5 pieces of solid, knot-free hinoki cypress in total. That's what I'm working with.
でもこれ350やん。この仕方が多いと思ったらここをこんだけ落としてこっちから350。
I cut a groove on the shelf board where the riser will slide in. Thick risers are a must because thin ones are bound to warp. I keep them 30 to 33 millimeters thick so that they won't warp or go out of shape. The top board is wide, so I make it thicker on purpose. But only on the front, I keep it at 33 millimeters so that everything lines up. It takes a little extra work, but when it's finished, all the shelves look even and clean.
まあ削り入るか。
I've run the shelf boards through the super surfacer, but I make sure to hand plane them at the site for the final finish. When I first measured the size of the parts, I drew a full-scale drawing on a 1-meter plywood panel. Now, I draw it directly on the actual wall where everything will sit and fit it there.
When the
plank is finished this cleanly, using the miter saw can leave a faint mark from the blade cover. So I tape the cover so that it won't touch the wood. I do it carefully at my own risk in situations like this. First is the bottom tier, the shelf board that becomes the top of the lower cabinet. The cabinet has hinged doors, not sliding doors, so there's no groove. That means I can notch the column and slide the shelf in from behind. I hold a planed offcut against the column, trace it, and cut the dado. I cut it for a snug fit, then I'll tap down the corners and set it in. The work is simple, just cutting the dado to match the thickness of the plank and sliding it in. But getting the length exactly right is the fussier part. Even in a 1 meter square space like this, something cut square doesn't always sit square. This time, I've decided to do this one without shelf trim. The trim makes the work much easier, but it leaves the trim's end grain visible when it's finished. I make sure to firmly attach the board on all 3 sides. I apply glue to the end grain of the shelf boards just in case to prevent cracking, then set them in place. It's a stop dado joint, sliding in from the back with only the front corner notched 15 millimeters. I haven't worked on the Joinery on both sides yet, so I can fasten the shelf from the sides. I've lined up the furring strips to match the shelves, so by screwing them from the sides, it holds firmly. For the second and third tiers, I fasten supports around the walls and set the shelf boards on top. Someone in the comments taught me a trick back when I did the staircase. Drive the screw until it sticks out just 3 millimeters. Touch the support into position, then drive it home. They said it sets cleanly and won't slip, even with glue. I'm doing it that way, and it really makes sense. For the second and third tiers, if you cut the length right and set them on the supports, you can screw them from below. It'll be set into place cleanly.
Oh, 後ろに飛んだ。あーとね。ホックでいい。
うつ伏せで潜っ。
なんでよ。こんな歩いて潜れるか、俺は。あれ。ワイの体が邪魔や。中入ってまえばええや。頭ってこれ急するんだよね。
The risers are the tricky part. Getting both the risers and the shelf boards to align firmly to length is actually trickier than joining them. There's not much room to move around in a tight space. I use glue and screws together and fasten everything solid so that nothing moves.
もうこれこっからやと。
Watching the video, it probably looks like I'm flailing around in a tiny space. But once you're inside and turn this way, there's actually quite a bit of room. I could even do the top part sitting down. Now the 3 altar tiers in the altar room are done. There's something I want to mention here. I'm currently selling Shoyan handmade cutting boards. In today's video, I used Hinoki cypress for a traditional Japanese household altar, and that's exactly the same wood I use for my cutting boards. You'll find Hinoki in just about every top sushi restaurant in Japan. It's the kind master chefs have trusted for generations. Hinoki is naturally antibacterial and tough, and it protects your finest knives from chipping. But the real secret is not just the wood, it's the kana, the Japanese hand plane. That's what seals the wood fibers, brings out that silky glow, and gives it a natural water resistance sandpaper could never touch. It's the same craftsmanship you saw in today's video. Each piece handcrafted with care by Carpenter Shoyan. Scan the QR code and bring a piece of that craftsmanship into your kitchen. Next up are the Joinery on both sides. I run cedar planks horizontally. The planks are 10 millimeters thick with tongue and groove edges. I fasten them directly to the wall studs. I only frame the corners because if you don't, the seams run straight across and bugs can travel right through the gaps. Cedar planks really are nice for an Joinery. They absorb moisture and feel settled. Though I suppose feeling settled doesn't really matter inside an Joinery. Of course, I run cedar planks on the ceiling too. I build the pillow shelf at about eye level. Nobody actually puts pillows on it these days, but this half-depth shelf has always been called the pillow shelf. It's really for towels and boxes. In the middle, I add a shelf for futons. We call it chudan, literally the middle shelf in Japanese. Now the standard Joinery with a middle shelf and pillow shelf in a 1 meter square are done. Now the room, altar section, and both Joinery are complete. The owner plans to use the whole room as the household altar room. This addition and renovation job was in the winter, but I managed to get it finished. I think it turned out well, at least to me. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.